Hi there, this is the Dark Queen. I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to my channel, Creepy Signal, bringing you all your nightmare material. Today I'm going to be talking about something that is an urban legend very close to my heart. And, you know, when I think of my city, San Antonio, I am a third generation native. You know, my family goes all the way back to, you know, some of the first settlers established here in San Antonio back from the Canary Islands. And you know, when I was told this story, I was a little bit older, and before I had ever been told this, the side of town where this is located, things didn't seem quite right about it. But when I was told the story, it all made sense. And you know, my grandmother has lived in the West Side her entire life, and when I was younger we used to travel over there. And if you've never been to the West Side of San Antonio, the real West Side, not the North Side West Side, the original authentic West Side, where it's got this authenticity to it. It's really San Antonio. It's so colorful and so real, and it's very, very, the area is very powerful on its beliefs in that area. And you know, as you pass the cemeteries, and we're talking, you know, about 1 to 2 acres of cemetery, one can see how much people really care for the loved ones that have passed on. You know, with holidays, you know, they have decorations and things like that. But when you keep going, you see sometimes like crucifixes for no real reason, you know, just there on telephone poles in the corners of streets. You'll see murals, and it's almost like they're protecting themselves from something. And then, you know, for me, I was like, what does this all mean, you know, when you're so young? And, you know, when I got a little bit older, you know, my grandmother and my mother sat me down and told me the tale of El Camaroncito, the tale of the dancing devil himself. And from that point, it made a little more sense. I mean, when we think about, you know, haunted destinations, you know, California, Louisiana, you know, they have their ghosts and, you know, their voodoo and, you know, different things, you know, that make them different. But, you know, I've yet to hear of a story where the devil literally danced with someone. And I think that's what makes San Antonio very unique. And, you know, I'm gonna tell you that story. And you know, it's a traditional tale that's been passed down, and you know, I do have the story in my book, Traditional Tales of Tejano Terror. And I've not only done the original story, but I did a contemporary one, because El Camaroncito, the very bar where he danced, is now a strip club. And I did the contemporary story called Dance for the Devil, where a girl's trying out to be a stripper. So you should definitely check it out. I will have the link to my book available for you guys to check out. It's only like $2.99, available on the ebook for Amazon. And you know, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the story now. And it was in the West Side, and we're talking the 1940s. And you know, there was a girl, and her family would always tell her, you know, be careful, you know, when going out, you never know what's gonna happen. And she thought, you know, they were just trying to keep her at home. And you know, she wanted to go out. She was very adamant about going out. So she went to the bar, El Camaroncito. And she goes in and sits down at the bar, and staring right across her is one of the most handsome men she had ever laid eyes on. And he's looking right at her. And he's suave and debonair. He looks very much like Clark Gable. Very handsome. And he comes over and he asks her to dance. And she gladly accepts. And they're dancing and swaying, you know, and the patrons there are, you know, cheering, you know, and there's laughter and smoke in the air. And you know, they continue to dance to the conjunto music, which is a very old Mexican kind of style, you know, romantic sort of music. And all of a sudden he steps on her foot, and she looks down and she sees a large hoof with dark red fur instead of his foot. And then she looks at his other foot, and it's the foot of a chicken. And she looks back up at him, and he's got this smile, this devious, sinister smile, and he starts laughing at her and walking backwards. And by that time, it's already like midnight, and so the women start looking, and they're screaming, and the men, I mean, they're filled with liquid courage, so they run right at him. I mean, you know, when it comes to West Siders, they're real, and they're gonna go straight at it. You know, they're not gonna hesitate, and they go straight for this guy. And he runs away to the bathroom, and they find nothing except the scent of sulfur, and he's gone. And that's the tale of El Camaroncito, and it's a story that a lot of natives know. And you know, I was told this story when I was about 10 years old, and it fascinated me so much. And I was very fascinated by the paranormal when I was much younger, and you know, before it became this whole fad, and you know, people getting more and more into you know, the world of the paranormal and the supernatural. And I want to say, I was, you know, in my high school years, I wanted, you know, I had already thought about writing a book, and you know, I wanted to find someone who was literally in the bar. Everyone, you know, when we're natives and we're talking about it, half the time they say, I have a family member that was in that bar. And you know, by this time I was like, well, I want to find someone who was literally in that bar. And I found a lot of next of kin. A lot of the people that had claimed to have been there had passed on, and you know, I was devastated. And I'm gonna give you a little bonus of this crazy story that I had encountered. And it was with an older woman. I mean, when I was talking to her, she was in her 90s, and I was about 15, 16 at the time. And she said, well, I've never, you know, I don't have anybody that was in the bar. I wasn't in the bar myself. She goes, but I know the tale of El Camaroncito. And she goes, you know, but you know, I'm sorry I can't help you. She goes, but I have something else. And I said, well, you do? I mean, what is it? And she goes, well, it was when I was much younger. I was about in the first grade at the time, and I wasn't much of a student. I tended to daze off a lot and not pay attention to things. And she said that one day her teacher was gonna let everybody out to recess, and that all of a sudden she started screaming mid-sentence. And all of a sudden, before she started looking up, she could start hearing the screeching of literal deaths. You know, the kids were moving in some direction. By the time she looked up, they were all scattered to the side of the wall. And when she looked straight in front of her, she saw this massive, like, devil in the center. And before she could get out of her desk, fifth graders started coming into the elementary class, you know, the first grade class, and they started snatching the kids up, and then they started throwing them out the window. And so one of them grabbed her and threw her out the window. And you know, by the time other faculty came into the class, they saw this, whatever it was, you know, this devil, and it was just gone. It's sulfur again. And she said at the time there was a church there, but there hadn't been a Catholic school. And the next year they built a Catholic school. And because of it, they wanted to give you know, families options because of the fact of this particular incident of being, you know, protected under the church, you know, and having that option. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. And she was like, yeah, I was at this school, you know, Briscoe Elementary. And I was like, oh my God, I live by there. And you know, to me, that was that was probably one of the creepiest stories I had ever heard. And she was much older, and the craziest thing was, you know, when I got closer, you know, to shake her hand and say thank you for, you know, sharing that story with me, it's very intriguing. You know, she had no real pupils to her eyes, and I was like, oh my gosh. And you know, when I talk about, you know, these particular stories with other people, You know, I always run into somebody that says, you know, let me share a story with you. And I'll leave you with this other final story. It was, I want to say 1 to 2 years ago, I was talking with a friend who was a co-worker at the time, and you know, like I said, I have a great passion when it comes to the tale of El Camaroncito. And I always try to get different locals' actual perspective on it. And I always appreciate a good opinion when it comes down to it. And she was also from the actual West Side herself, so even more so, you know, I was, you know, just looking to see, you know, what she thought of it. And she was a very frank individual. She didn't really care about, you know, dramatizing things too much. She was very frank, to the point. You know, she had a lot of law enforcement as far as her background, and she was telling me, she said, well, you know, I think it's very possible. I think it's very real. You know, the West Side is very, very haunted. And I said, well, really? You know, what makes you believe that? And she said, well, you know, I experienced something one time. And I was like, really? And she was like, yeah. She goes, I was only about maybe 14 at the time, and it was during summer, and it was late at night, and she said her grandmother had always told her, you know, don't be out, you know, past midnight, you need to be home by then. And she said, okay, so midnight's my curfew. And this was during summer, and she was over talking at her boyfriend's outside. You know how teenagers are. And when all of a sudden, you know, she's looking at her watch and it's like 11:58, and she realizes, hey, I need to be home. And she only lived like 1 or 2 blocks away. And so she basically, you know, tells her boyfriend goodbye, and she's walking, and there's no one, you know, outside at all. It's just dead silent, right? And you know, she's walking, and she's passing like this like dirt road alley. And when she passes it, she starts hearing all these cans move. And you know, she's like walking and walking, she's hearing them move more and more. And when she looks back as she passes the alley, all of a sudden she sees this like giant like demon devil walking out of it, and it's following her. And she said it's like 7 foot tall, it's gray, it's got these red eyes and these giant horns. And I was like, well, you know, to me, I'm like, you know, trying to get specifics, you know, I'm like, well, you know, I know a lot about that. And I was like, well, what, you know, how big were the horns? She's like, the horns were huge. She's like, if they were as big as like longhorn horns. I was like, are you telling me it looked like, you know, the demon from Legend? She's like, she goes, yeah, it did. And she's like, I never even thought about how to describe it, but yeah, that's exactly what it looked like. And it was just, she said the creepiest thing was, you know, she was like, at first, maybe it was a joke, but the way it walked, it was walking slow. And she said it didn't matter how fast she ran, it just continued to walk. And you know, she said she floored it. She didn't care. She said she dropped her lipstick, she dropped her compact, she didn't even care. You know, and 1 to 2 minutes she got home, and you know, she was like, she ran through her fence, and you know, she knocked on the door. She was screaming at her grandmother to open it. And when her grandmother let her in, you know, she was lighting Virgin Mary candles. And she said, you know, Grandma, this is what I saw. You know, I saw this giant demon outside, you know, and it was just walking. And she said, see, that's why I told you not to be out, you know, past midnight. And she was like, she was freaked out. She said, you know, and to me, I mean, I can tell when a lot of people, you know, love to bend the truth, or they're just looking for, you know, that sort of acceptance or praise. And you know, she just looked really traumatized. And that story really did stick with me. She's like, no, I feel that it is very haunted in that side of town. And I was like, wow, that's super creepy. And you know, that's basically, you know, my particular the particular tales that have been told to me. And you know, some of them have been passed down, some of them have been shared. But yeah, that is basically, you know, the sightings that, you know, I've been told personally, but you know, I definitely hope that you enjoyed this video. Hopefully I'll be making more, and I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to my channel, Creepy Signal, bringing you more nightmare material. Well, I better get out of here.